development is that rapper Boosie, who was initially sentenced to a crushing 10 years behind bars, has now had his prison time reduced to just 2 years after new evidence pointing toward his innocence came to light. But while his fans celebrated the surprising turn, not everyone was happy. Charleston White, known for his outbursts and controversial antics, completely lost control in court, verbally exploding at the decision, then going so far as to crash. Out physically, assaulting officers and turning the courtroom into absolute chaos. Now let's dive into the madness, because this story is everything. Redemption, betrayal, celebration, and absolute mayhem. When Boosie was first sentenced to 10 years, the world of hip-hop and his loyal fan base erupted in disappointment and outrage. Many felt it was an unjust punishment, that prosecutors had gone too far, and that the charges stacked against him were inflated for the sake of making an example out of a rapper with a history of run-ins with the law. But at the time, there wasn't much anyone could do. Judges had spoken, sentencing had been handed down, and Boosie was left staring at a decade of his life trapped behind concrete walls and steel bars. Yet, fate had other plans, because just when it seemed like the book was closed, new evidence surfaced that completely changed the direction of the case. Please do not forget to like this video, share, and subscribe to this channel if you want more updates like this. Thank you. Now, let's get back into the video. That evidence, according to insiders, proved that much of what Boosie was accused of had either been fabricated, misrepresented, or lacked the credibility needed to justify a decade-long sentence. Rumors began circulating about mishandled evidence, questionable witnesses, and even overlooked surveillance footage that painted a very different picture from the one prosecutors had initially presented. Once this information was introduced, the entire way of the case began to crumble, and suddenly, the same system that had tried to bury Boosie beneath years of punishment now had to admit they had gotten it wrong. Judges don't like to admit mistakes, but the facts became too heavy to ignore, and when the ruling came that his time was officially reduced from 10 years to just 2, it felt like a miracle moment for Boosie supporters. The courtroom, packed with reporters, family, fan, and onlookers, erupted in shock and celebration. Some cried tears of joy, some jumped out of their seats clapping, and even Boosie himself sat stunned, blinking rapidly as though he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. He had been preparing mentally for a full decade of imprisonment, telling himself he had no choice but to push through, and now suddenly the chains that seemed set to drag him down for so long had loosened. A 2-year sentence is still time, yes, but compared to 10, it feels like freedom is just around the corner. For Boosie, it was redemption. For his fans, it was vindication. For hip-hop culture, it was a victory. But for Charleston White, it was the beginning of an absolute meltdown. Charleston White, who has made a name for himself as one of the most unapologetic, unfiltered, and controversial personalities alive, could not handle the news. He had spoken out many times in the past about Boosie, often criticizing him harshly, accusing him of being a negative influence, and celebrating the idea of him facing punishment. So when the judge essentially admitted the system had overreached and handed Boosie a second chance, Charleston's face reportedly twisted with rage in the courtroom. At first, it was just words, angry muttering, then louder outbursts, shouting over the crowd, pointing fingers at the judge, at the lawyers, and at Boosie himself. People turned in shock. Cameras swiveled to capture his fury, and the tension rose as security moving closer to keep him under control. But words weren't enough for Charleston White that day. No, he went beyond the verbal tirade. Witnesses say he leapt to his feet, stormed toward the bench, and began yelling accusations at the judge, claiming corruption, favoritism, and injustice. Officers quickly tried to restrain him, but in a shocking twist, Charleston lashed out physically, pushing and shoving the very people trying to calm him down. Chaos erupted instantly. Screams rang out, cameras flashed wildly, and what should have been a historic moment of relief for Boosie turned into an explosive circus thanks to Charleston's inability to contain his anger. Reports say that in his fury, he even struck an officer, escalating the situation from verbal disruption to outright assault, something that could land him in serious legal trouble of his own. The contrast between Boosie's moment of triumph and Charleston's spiral into chaos couldn't be sharper. On one side of the courtroom, you had a man being granted a chance of redemption, a lifeline thrown to someone who was on the brink of losing everything, while on the other side, you had Charleston White, crashing out so hard in public that he might end up facing his own set of charges, his credibility shredded, his reputation cemented as volatile and unpredictable. Some fans online laughed, saying Charleston had finally lost the plot. Others shook their heads, calling his behavior dangerous and disgraceful. And yet, as wild as it was, nobody could deny it made the story even more gripping. Now, let's not forget what this means for Boosie. Reducing his time from 10 years to 2 is massive. It means instead of losing an entire era of his life, he'll be home in a fraction of that time, potentially returning to music, to family, and to fans who've been screaming for his freedom since the beginning. The legal victory restores not only his hope, but also his position as someone who beat the odds against him. You can bet that when he walks out, the music will reflect the pain, the betrayal, and the triumph of this journey, and his fan base will be bigger and louder than ever. Of course, the system itself doesn't come out clean. The question that now haunts this case is how close they came to wrongfully burying a man for a decade based on shaky evidence. How many others have faced similar fates without the benefit of a spotlight, without the kind of fan base that can amplify their struggle? Boosie's case becomes more than personal. It becomes symbolic of a broken process, a warning that justice isn't always blind, and sometimes it takes a miracle or at least new evidence to pull someone back from the brink. Meanwhile, Charleston White is now facing his own narrative. His crash out in court has sparked outrage, memes, and endless debates across social media. Some defend him, saying he was speaking truth to power and expressing frustration many feel about the justice system bending to celebrity influence. But far more people are dragging him online, mocking the way he lost control, pointing out the irony that while Boosie's sentence was reduced, Charleston may have just earned himself new charges. Clips of the incident are spreading everywhere, replayed over and over, cementing his meltdown as one of the most memorable courtroom fiascos in recent memory. The energy outside the courthouse was no less electric. Supporters chanted Boosie's name, some holding up signs and shouting that justice had finally been served. Others expressed pure disbelief,